We're delighted to have you here. Especially want to welcome Emily Brzezinski here. It's a real privilege to have her back in our good company. And of course, Mark and Ian, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you for coming. The Brzezinski family has made every one of these events where we have the Brzezinski Prize awarded, and it really does mean it's a special thing for us. This was a tribute that the Smith-Richardson family Foundation wanted to give to recognize one of the most remarkable intellects in American history, which was Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, and the role he played in shaping strategic thinking for America. And we still benefit from it to this day. And part of the way to commemorate that was to establish an annual prize and this was something that Dr. Brzezinski, he was reluctant for it, but he said, if we can recognize the contribution of others who have made salient contributions to American security, then I'm willing for it to happen. And it was in that spirit, Senator, that one of the conversations I had with Spig before he went home was to talk about who would be the recipients. And he mentioned you, and I'm so proud that the selection committee, I didn't put too much spin on the ball. I put a little bit, maybe, but it was well earned from your lifetime of service. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Folks, just a little prefatory. If we do have an emergency, we won't. We've never had one in the 5 years we've been here, but you'll follow my instructions. We're going to go out. The exits are behind me. We'll take the stairs down to the ground level. We'll take 2 left-hand turns and a right-hand turn. We're going to go over to National Geographic. We'll assemble there, and I will pay for everybody's tickets to see the Queen of Egypt. It's a great show it's on right now. It's a wonderful show. You'll enjoy it. And if you want to go on your own, you pay for your own way. I mean, if I don't have to, okay. This is a real privilege to be able to both recognize the contributions of Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski and his remarkable life, and then to celebrate that by keeping alive what really motivated his passion, which was to do strategic thinking with moral purpose. He didn't use those terms. That was the conversation that I had with the Smith-Richardson people on how to characterize this award. And it is with that spirit that we do have a selection committee, and this year, unanimously, people decided the recipient for this should be John Warner. We're going to explore the reasons for that today in a conversation with him. The one thing he did make me promise, is that no speeches. He's willing to engage in a conversation, and I'm going to bring all of you into that conversation at the right moment. But this is really about celebrating this remarkable man by bringing alive the ideas that still motivate his thinking, his passions, his interests. And I'm so very grateful we can do that. So if I could ask you, Senator Warner, please come to the stage. We're going to get started. But I first want to give you the award, the little presentation. You just come right up here, sir.
Oh, John. Is this a good conduct medal?
This is, I think it's a perfect attendance medal.
I never got one in the Marines or the Navy.
Well, this is Dr. Brzezinski Prize, and we congratulate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, why don't you?
John, I've been in this room with you since, and you're all the previous rooms, but I never thought I'd be up on the dais with you. And how this happened is a mystery that I don't understand. Now, we may get to the bottom of it as we move along in this dissertation. But have at it, old boy.
Okay. The one thing that I would ask, John, if we could get some guys to move the podium back so our colleagues over here have a clear vision line. If we
can't go to sleep.
Could we do that? We just pull the whole thing back to the corner. I think we'll be just fine.
We're good.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get us started. Like I say, I have the privilege of having thought about this for a bit. You all are still thinking about it. I am going to turn to you, but let me get started. Senator, I don't know of anyone else that has had experiences in all 3 of the branches of the federal government.
I guess so. That's true.
Of course, you had executive positions with the Navy, and welcome, John Greenert. I'm delighted to have you back on
Hey, Skipper.
post, and we've got a real strong contingent of the Navy here tonight, which
Yeah,
is
Will
which
Ball,
is
he's
understandable.
there.
Will
Second
Ball
half.
is here. Oh my goodness, Ed Giabasti's over here. It's really great to have you all. So strong executive branch experience. Obviously, you distinguished yourself as this career on Capitol Hill, senior senator from.
John, the biggest achievement, I was on Capitol Hill 30 years. I didn't get locked up. So we're not going to do anything here today that can give
No,
ground
I don't
for
think
that.
so. I rather think we'll be able to steer clear of any peril that way. You know, and as I recall, you also were in a district attorney's office at the time.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of fun in that.
So
that's a good way to start and practice the law.
Let me just ask you to reflect on, you know, you've had a life where you've lived in each of the aspects of the government. Tell me how you view checks and balances.
View checks and balances?
Yes, sir. We've divided authority in our country, and we've given it to different.
Well, that works. And you're talking about constitutional balance.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Let's
well,
talk about that.
Right now, it's being challenged, and that's going to be my keynote. We have got to take this institute and the writings of this wonderful man, Zbigniew, and make them available for people to use that want to go against some of the things being said about the checks and the balances and how our system works today. Because he's got a wonderful vision into the future, and he's put it there, and I'll get to how we're going to write it up.
Okay, well, let's do that. But let me ask your thinking now. I mean, it's an unsettled time.
It works. That's the main thing, John. And it has worked for 200 plus years. And it's been the envy of the world. It's enabled us to be a leader in the free world and to project our own form and belief in freedom and democracy as far as we can. So put me down in the favorable column.
All right, we will do that. Sir, but one theme that was rather steady throughout your public service has been national security. How do you feel about things now? What are your thoughts about where we are as a nation?
Well, fortunately, the military have always had the ability to duty honor, they're sworn to that, to rise above it and keep apart from politics. It's essential that the military not get wrapped up in the political system of this country. Not that the political system isn't good and have its good and bad parts, but it's better that they have made the commitment to serve the country, to do that as their first mission, and to let the rest of us go at each other in our politics. And so by staying out of that removes them from a lot of, I think, petty controversy. And then, of course, they've got, every one of them, the willingness to give their life. Stop to think about it. When you go in the military, you never know what your assignments are going to be. And you've literally said, I will serve my country at the full risk of my life. And you got your family to be considering. But that makes you ramrod in the back a little bit, you know, as you stay in the trenches, pucker up a little. So that's an important fact. And we got to keep it that way. And so far, I've had the opportunity and the privilege, I say with a great sense of humility, to have had a modest military career. I mean, I went into the Navy when I was 17. I'll never forget, the Battle of the Bulge hit us. And it was Christmas in 1944. And my father had been in World War I as a doctor. And he was an Army captain in the trenches, wounded, everything. And as I came along as a youngster, he taught me the fundamentals of the military life. Not that he wanted me to do this or that, but he just felt that it meant a world to him and it worked. And by golly, his son was going to do it. So there we come, the war's coming on. And I said, Dad, I'd really like to go in. And I'm kind of tired of school. He said, yeah, I know all about it. Look at this bad report card and everything. So anyway, we had a big argument, and I promised if I did one good semester and scored well, he would sign the papers. When you were 17, you had to have parental consent. And sure enough, my mother never could understand, why did you say Christmas week of 1944? Because this country was trapped and its armed forces were suffering casualties, which in the end totaled the greatest number of casualties in the Battle of the Bulge of any single battle in World War II. Mm-hmm. And our whole concept that we were winning this thing began to go tilt. So anyway, 17-year-old guys like me, all of them wanted to go. And we went in, and the military probably did much more for me than I did for them. Because I went into technical work and radios and electrics and all that stuff. And I was in school, and we were getting ready to be assigned to ships and everything. And Harry Truman saw the wisdom of bringing this war to an end. Mm-hmm. And it ended like that. And the next thing you know, it was all ships turn around, go home, and back on to school, things like that. But I carried with me a sense of discipline. I got the GI Bill, sent me through engineering school. I made friends all over. It was a fully expanding experience in my life, and I'm always grateful. So I trotted along. I wanted to be in the Marine Corps, but Father in World War I, as a surgeon, his division, 5th Division, would work alongside a Marine division. The Marines just have corpsmen. They had no medical doctors as an integral part of their command. They still don't. And so he said, I sewed up too many Marines, and I could not sleep at night thinking you're out there. No, that bunch. So Navy was it. But then I joined the Marine Corps because I always wanted to do it, and got my commission, and sure enough, my number came up, and I did a modest tour in Korea and saw a bit. But again, I was in the communications and radio business, and I got a little flying in, but it was a wonderful experience for me. So I've been owing the military for a long time. Now you trot along and you get on Capitol Hill, and I got on the Armed Services Committee. All 30 years I was there, I was on that committee. Wonderful group of men, wonderful. You know, people forget the Senate that I served in from 78 to 98. During those 30 years, that Senate was 70 percentile World War II veterans. And so I see my friend Chuck Robb. You know, when the senior boys get around you, how they say, it's going to be this way. Now, you can argue all you want on the floor, but when we need your vote, that's it. And that's the way the Senate worked in those days, and Goldwater and Howard Baker and all those wonderful guys, all of them who'd served in the military. Danny Inouye. It was a wonderful group. Old Ted Stevens, God angry Ted. And we just got together and we made things work. But that, and not to demean today's Senate, except I'm very disappointed on the inaction that they've taken. But we got to live with that Senate as it is, and hopefully some of the work that we may do as a consequence of this meeting today, I would like to think could infiltrate and inspire one or more of those senators to get up and be more articulate with the very principles that the man we honor today did.
Yeah. Senator, one of the early things that you did for the country was help negotiate an agreement with the Soviets about incidents at sea. This was, we were having, as we do, we kind of rub up against each other. We're trying to gather intelligence. We're trying to kind of send political signals, and sometimes it was getting dangerous.
And we were having incidents not unlike what's occurred here in the last month or so. You had that Russian ship come alongside our destroyer, and the proximity to the ship is about 40 yards or so. That's about right, isn't it, Chief? But it was damn dangerous, because when you're operating a big ship like that and fairly heavy seas. And so we had a lot of those incidents. And I give the credit in many respects to Dr. Kissinger. Now, he somehow is missing today, isn't he?
No, Zbig's not here today, unfortunately.
He's not here.
Or I mean,
Old
Dr. Kissinger's not here today.
I got to know him, and so he said, we got to stop this. And I said, well, I've had some experience in the Navy Secretariat. And he said, fine, then you do this job. And it was a fascinating job. It was in the most intense period of the Cold War. I mean, the tension between the Soviet Union and the U.S. was just rigid. And here I am going over there, and I had to go over covertly in the beginning. I was hidden in civilian clothes and taken around through different countries to smuggle me up in there. But I'd sit down with those Russians, and I had a team of wonderful naval officers that came with me. And for 2 years, we went back and forth. And if I can tell some of the humorous sides of it, they came over here one time. And so I got the Army War College. And the problem is that some of those guys had to start every session with a drink. Well, I, learned to nibble a little bit here in alcohol, but nothing like they did.
Yeah, they're pros.
And one of the guys, head of the delegation, he was the roommate of the CNO at that time, the Soviet CNO, and they were great pals. He was an old submariner, and he said to me one time in one of our sessions, "I got to have a drink." So I put the session aside and delayed it for 20 minutes. Took him down to the on the base, BOQ, and a bar there, officers' bar. And of course, he had on all these medals. And the Soviets had a way of, they didn't give you a star for your second medal. You got another ribbon, and the things went from here all the way down here.
It weighed about 40 pounds.
Yeah, 40 pounds. And he walked in, and I'm in a sloppy old suit and everything. And we sit down, and I told the waiter, I want 2 drinks. And we bought the drinks, and he was much pleasure. See, he had his drink and everything. Get ready to leave. I didn't have any money. So I said to the waiter, look, I'm Secretary of the Navy. And this waiter said, and who the hell is this joker sitting next to you? I said, he's the Vice Chief of the Soviet Navy. So this guy goes off and he calls the MP on the base, and the MPs come over to the bar. And they really want to grill me. Well, finally, by this time, people could come, and I got some money, paid the bill. Then that same guy, 2 nights later in the Hilton Hotel, where I got a whole section of the floor for him, he fell in his bathtub and banged his head, Again, he'd been drinking. So I established in my cadre, I had about 2 admirals and 3 captains and a couple of commanders, just wonderful, bright people working that same with me. We would have the drinking watch and the non-drinking watch. And it was inviolate. So things were getting along, but the Soviets knew that we were not matching them in drinking. I'll get to the bottom of this, John, because this is not elevating the intellect of this crowd. But so they took us out to the Naval Academy, which, folks, if you ever get over there, it is one of the most beautiful old naval facilities in the world. And they built the ships right in the same yard that the Navy lived and operated them. And they had a wonderful bar. And so this old 4-star admiral gave us a dinner. And they like to start their dinners at 3 in the afternoon. And they're drinking. Well, this guy saw that half of my guys would raise the glass and nothing happened. He got furious, absolutely furious. And I told my guys, hold tight, boys, just cool it. And so the old boy got up and he poured a drink and said, every man pour his drink. Okay, drinks got poured. All men stand here. You cannot refuse to drink with me. This is a toast to our mothers. Oh, I'd say to my guys, hang tough. You're not drinking with your mother. And he took this glass and he threw it against the wall, smashed it. And the whole meeting just descended into a, the sooner we got out of there, the better. But we finally got this agreement through, and Zbig was not involved in this. I'm not sure why. Nixon had came over while I was in my last visit there, and we had this picture taken, everybody. Oh, Henry is not in the picture, although he was very much on the trip with us. Henry had gone to the restroom when the picture was taken. And to this day, when I see him, he looks at me, "You didn't wait too long to take that picture," you know. Picture went all over the world. So we got to make more progress with this meeting here.
Yes,
so
we will, sir. So let's just step.
Yeah,
I'm having too much fun.
Yeah.
Let's just step back. I mean, you worked with the Russians at the time, and it was a testy time.
Oh,
We're right back into it. I mean, you've had lots of your career you've worked around the Russians.
Yeah.
What should we be doing now?
it's the old adage that Zbig had. You got to learn how to agree to disagree. And you've got to understand that we've got a very serious situation facing us in the Russians beginning to collaborate with China. Now here you've got Russia, who has about 1/10 of the economy of China. I mean, it's that much. And therefore, but Russia, it's kind of got a lot of experience with us, more so than China. But we cannot let that type of coalition between those two countries begin to further undermine our, frankly, disabuse of our allied nations in NATO and in other things that we've done. I talked to a group of people the other day who said, "Well, what's NATO do?" I said, "Are you going to Europe this summer?" And they said, "Oh yes, all our group's going to Europe." Well, you're walking the streets of those countries in Europe simply because there's peace. And that peace is being justified night and day by NATO. It's there to protect. It's not there to react against anybody. It's there to protect. And we've got to stand up strong against the verbiage that's being used against our allies and friends. Now, that deserves a hand of applause. Wake up.
That's what say it does.
You know, the Soviets, they always say, time to have a hand of applause. And so you always applause when they want to applaud.
Well, I'm glad that you've signaled out the importance that allies have played with us through the years. I mean, we had allies because it made it easier for us to carry the collective burden.
Correct.
But Americans seem to be confused about that these days. I mean, you were a politician. You, Senator Rob, were going back and talking to average people. Do they understand the importance of allies, and how do we talk to them about that?
Well, the people, it's the demagoguery that's being poured out about we're carrying and paying all their bills and so on. Now, I agree, when we were in the Senate committee, we always tried to nudge up their contributions, and they never really came up to ours, many of them. But there are other advantages that those allies provided. They, for instance, here's this incident that took place in the Gulf yesterday. Don't you think that every one of our allies, we're going right to them, who do you think did it? What information do you have on it? And I'd bet you in this instance, most of them are still sharing their top intelligence with us, and it's got to be. That's the most important thing. The economics can rise and fall, but that is strength of linkage on intelligence. It's got to remain strong.
We also are in a pretty tense way now with China.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about China?
Well, China is very ambitious, but they know how to pace themselves. And say what you say about old Nixon. I'll talk about him in a minute. I knew him very well. He and Henry Kissinger. Henry was the architect. They finally got the padlock opened, and started it. And each successive administration, I think, has positively added to it until where we are now. And we're playing a game with them on these tariffs. Now, most people just don't understand the complexity of balances of tariffs and so forth. But they understand the reality of the farmers not being able to have a market to sell their soybeans and so forth. And this jerking them back and forth, and this ridiculous, and this, I've got an agreement here in the pocket, here it is right here, and it goes back in the pocket again, and we don't know what that is. And it's very difficult for us to manage our markets given the way that this is being handled by the executive branch right now.
Are we heading to a new Cold War with China?
Oh, no, I don't think so. China's too smart. They've come too far. What have they got to gain by a war? What is it? I know they pull our chain down there with the islands in the South Pacific, wherever it is down in there. But the Navy's doing the right thing. They run the ships through there to assert the freedom of the seas. We got a pretty good balance. That thing will flare up now and then, but they're not going to start a war. It's not to their advantage.
You know, we had
They've got. I'll never forget Sam Nunn, the boss of this outfit for so many years, was really one of the closest friends, and to this day I ever had in the Senate. He was a wonderful man. He was chairman, I was ranking member, and the two of us would travel all over the world together and quietly see people with very low-key and appearances. We never shot for the big PR. But he was good and solid. But he always said about China that they will pace themselves and it's not to their advantage. And we went into Deng Xiaoping, just the two of us, sat there with him, and he was the third person on the dais, and maybe some interpreters around. And Sam and I'd flip a coin, which one was going to open up the mandatory requirement we got to tell them about human rights. And so I'm not belittling the importance of human rights, but we had to, each Codell had to do that. So we got by that, and Deng Xiaoping shook his head after we talked about human rights and everything. He said, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I would like to pursue it, he said. I would like to pursue it. But my main priority, and he had a magnificent command the way he'd talk and be quiet and then talk, and you'd lean forward and he'd talk. He said, I have a problem. And it faces me every night I go to bed. I have 20 million people have no food in their stomachs. When I can find a means by which to feed my people, then we'll really explore best we can to match your human rights. So there's a practicality, and they have now got, I think, their cost of living and lifestyle somewhat improved, and they're not going to get in a war. Do you think otherwise? What do you think?
Well, sir, it is about you tonight, not me.
Beg your pardon?
This is about
you're
you
on
tonight.
Trial too. You're not going to get off. We've known each other for so long, it's not ridiculous. There are times when he's been my boss, when he was Deputy Secretary of Defense. I'm Secretary of the Navy. He's on the staff of the Armed Services Committee. I was your boss. But we've managed that balance, you know?
It's always been asymmetric. You've had power and I haven't. And I've always had it does shape your consciousness, you know, when you're like me. But I do think we need to stand up. The fact that they may have a legitimate point doesn't mean we shouldn't be standing up for our principles and articulating them.
Well, I think we are in a way. We're not selling the farmers out. We're trying to make our farmers get by this, it'll be something else, and they might wake up on this incident of the oil thing that happened, you know, because they're highly dependent on that.
So can I go back on, we've had some close calls in the South China Sea.
Yeah.
We've had, when Chinese commander had too much Viagra for breakfast, and he
Yeah.
was off sailing a little too aggressively.
Sure.
You know, go back to your experience when you were doing incidents at sea. First of all, was the military opposed to it, and it was a politically initiated thing by civilian leaders, or was the military? What was the role of the military?
The military, and I think they properly, are always a little suspicious of the civilians in control. Mm-hmm. Now that's the constitutional way we have our government established, is that the military are controlled by the political system. And they salute and march off and have done it for years. But they should remain suspicious, because not that we're trying to do things to undercut them or anything like that, but they're a little suspicious about it, and I'm all for their remaining suspicious. Now, as the China Sea thing go, I've followed a little bit. It pops up now and then. But the Navy is, in a very modulated way, returned the signals that sailors understand their ships going through. And I don't think they've ever actually pulled one of their ships out and tried to block passage of a ship down in that area. I don't know. Am I wrong on that, Skipper?
We've had some reckless behavior.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But it hasn't, you know, and we see other patterns. It does appear to be under central positive control.
But your question was incidents at sea. The Navy was apprehensive that we might give away, because what it is a framework of rules and regs to be operated and followed in international waters by warships, Soviet, Russian, and now U.S. And once you begin to tell the sailors they can go into this and they can't go into that, their suspicion our sailors should be suspicious. But all along, I had a whole team of Navy guys working with me the whole time. So you can be damn sure they called up old Admiral Moore the moment I did anything. And bless his heart, he was a tough old guy and wonderful CNO.
So I'm going to ask one last question, and I'm going to. Do we have microphone? Okay, so let me just ask one last question, and I'll open up here. You worked for a lot of different presidents.
Yeah.
I think you even started doing advance work for Richard Nixon, as I recall.
Bill Rogers was Secretary of State, and when Nixon made the decision he wanted a 1960 run, he commissioned Rogers to go out and find about 4, 5, 6. We had a very small staff, 6 individuals, all men, to work with Haldeman and Ehrlichman. They were the 2 chiefs under Nixon, as to do advance work. In other words, you go out ahead of the candidate, visit with the mayor and the chief and the Secret Service, and check all these things and see that it's okay. And then you travel with the candidate for about 3 or 4 stops. Then you get off, go back home, see your family for a night or 2, and then go back on the road again. And it was a fascinating experience. I enjoyed it enormously. But I remember one thing about that 60 race. Kennedy had the charm and the warmth, and Nixon, he just had a nervousness about it. We never fully detected what it was, and a lot of people tried to write about it. But he was not at ease around the Kennedys. And he sort of felt that they had money and privilege, and and his wife had struggled to get where they were. So it was out of balance. But I tell you, the one incident I had with him that I never forgot, and I always have defended him on this, and that is, I took him on his last trip in the campaign to go out to California and vote. He was a resident of California. And so we loaded up this big plane we were flying, had lots of wonderful women, the secretaries and all kinds of things. Must have 50 people on our big plane. And I picked him up and took him out there. And we were in the hotel room as the returns were coming in, with Haldeman, Ehrlich, myself, a fellow named Unger, and maybe one other guy. And Nixon came in, and first thing he said to me, he said, John, because I was the head advance man on the trip, he said, you forgot to bring me my scotch and soda. And oh yeah, I did that. His idea of a sleeping pill was a weak scotch and soda. And I had to spend an inordinate amount of time finding what was the critical point between weak and right. And so he was get his night's sleep and everything. But he was fun. And then he said, listen, you guys go to bed. I know something about politics, and this thing is not going to be decided tonight. And we got to get up maybe early in the morning. I want you right up, get on that plane. Well, sure enough, he get up at the crack of dawn. The whole thing in Texas, they can't find the votes. Chicago, they know they were gone and burned. And the whole thing was a mess. And got the plane, we took it out to the end of the strip, and the press were all over trying to find it. Right at the end of the strip, I'll never forget, I put the staff on the plane, went back and got Mrs. Nixon and the vice president, put them in the car, drove them out there. And in those days, the planes all dumped their oil and gas as we were coming in. This is the dirtiest place we had the plane in, mud puddles and gasoline all over the place. And there was an old mechanic sleeping there, and he was holding a little radio, and the radio was blasting, "We can't find the votes in this state, we can't find it." And Nixon stopped and he said, "Can I listen with you?" This guy said, "Oh yeah." He says, "Fine." So here's the Vice President of the United States and a guy up to his ankles in mud and everything else, and then listened to the returns. And this went on for about 5 minutes. And Nixon said to me, he said to Herb Klein, his press secretary, I was standing, Herb right there, went, "Get the president on the phone right away." And Herb said, "Well, let's discuss what is it you want to talk to him about." Nixon said, "The continuity of the presidency of the United States should never be in doubt for 1 minute. Not 1 minute. And this mess is going to take an eternity to solve. I'm going to have my announcement that I will not contest the election." And everybody was, well. So we got on the plane and we're flying back, and sure enough, we got back to Washington, and he went in and saw the president, and he announced the next day that very same statement. He thought he put his country first against his political interests.
Just as you have, sir. I mean, you've done the same thing, and very grateful for your leadership.
I've been a lucky guy.
No, we do have.
Guys, listen, there's a lot of people sitting out here.
We do have.
Worked for me one time, and they're nodding their heads. That rascal's up there only because I did this and I did that for him for all these years. I see him laughing.
We do have a chance. We've got about 15 minutes, and would welcome any questions that people want to bring up from the floor. I've got more I could do if you want, but if people do want to raise a question.
Let's have some fun. And you use the "we" can answer. See, you and I together.
No. I'm smarter than that.
Yeah.
Anything that people want to raise a question?
Come on, fire.
Oh, John, we got a microphone right down here. John Alterman is the Brzezinski chairholder here at CSI.
And a fan of Senator John Warner. Senator, I remember in about 2005, 2006, you came over to CSIS and you said, things in Iraq are going sideways. What should we do? And I've thought about that as I've thought about where we are in Syria. And I've thought, what would John Warner say we should do about Syria? Do we need to be more engaged in Syria? Do we need to be working more with allies? Do we need to be working more with adversaries? Is Syria somebody else's problem? With all of your national security experience, where should we rank Syria on our list of priorities?
Well, I was in the saddle. I'll never forget George Bush Sr. Got Bob Dole and me over to the office, and he said, we got to form a coalition and repel the Saddam Hussein's attack into Kuwait. This is terrible. And John, you write the resolution up. And I actually wrote the resolution. This is a bit of humor, and I'll give you that too. And it said that Bush, would join the UN to enforce the UN resolutions. And so he drew it up carefully and broad and said it's for the purpose of liberating this wrong that had been inflicted by Saddam Hussein. We're going to have 12 countries join. And we put it all together, and it looked good. We had a good, solid bunch of Republicans. But the Democrats were totally opposed to it. I'm not sure where you were. I mean, you might want to give me your vote. And I can't remember this. Yeah, you do. I won't ask you. But anyway, I think you might have voted with me. I think you did, yeah. Because we only won that thing on the floor of the Senate to give the President of the United States the right to use force by 5 votes. And all of that region was under fire. And that was a close one, but we pulled it together. I remember Sam Nunn, to this day, said that was a vote that he knew he'd made wrong. But George Mitchell was a majority leader. But I bring that up. That was the beginning of when we went in, and there was a clear challenge to democracy and freedom and everything by Saddam Hussein tackling that country. And that began to embolden us. We went in, and my God, the military put that campaign together, and within 36 hours, no, more than that, 3 days, I guess, that thing was wrapped up and was a very decisive victory, and done. Military, just give them the job, and they did it. And I'll never forget that. One other incident. Nixon said, when he wanted to get, not Nixon, but George Bush Sr., you got to have Democrats on this thing. And Dole says, well, John's very good at getting Democrats. You get a Democrat. Chuck, I found Lieberman. He'd only been in the Senate 3 years. I said, now, this is a chance for you to get some real exposure. So to this day, he says, you sold me that bill of goods. And so it was the Warner-Lieberman bill, and we got it through. But that was the beginning. And we were sort of on a roll, and we felt that we could eventually do the same corrective action in Iraq itself. And Syria was sort of a bad little problem, but it wasn't as big as the bigger scene in Iraq. And so our military once again put together its best effort. And I think this time, George W. Bush, we made the invasion. I worked hard, and we put together everything he needed to get it through. And I tell you, it never has come about that section of the world. You can pick out Syria, you can pick out the other differences of the nations over there. They're far from resolving their own problems, even though we've given them relative peace, absent the problems that pop up in Syria from time to time. Oh, those were interesting days. But let's go back to the first one with the going down to, we got 12 nations to join us and go down, and we won in 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it was. And the guys, the senators, all wanted to go and congratulate the troops. And so Dole said, you're the chairman. Oh, I don't know, I was ranking. I guess that Sam was still chairman. No, yeah. And I took 4 successive Codels in 10 days' time, over and back. And the last one, I'll never forget. Old General Schwarzkopf. Do you remember?
Norm Schwarzkopf.
Norm Schwarzkopf. On the last Codel, I've got these guys all going on the plane. He obligatory standing on the wall, giving them a medal and all that thing in your hand and all that stuff. And he says, Warner, come here a minute. So I walked in with him, and I'd been good to him. He grabbed me by the coat, and he slammed me up against the wall. He said, I'm trying to wrap this thing up. If you bring another Codel over here, I'm going to bury you somewhere. I mean, I deserved it. I was pushing him and his staff, another Codell and another Codell. And years later, we had a couple of drinks and laughed together about that time. But boy, I'm telling you, that was not civilian control.
He was not the one to try to test that out on either.
All right.
Right back here, Pat Towle.
Yeah.
Right behind you, Pat.
Thank you. Senator, let me stay on the subject of civilian control. We've had a couple of tragedies in the Pacific Fleet in the last year and a half. A couple of destroyers got into collisions, 17 sailors lost. And these things are always very complicated, but it seems pretty clear that in the judgment of many people who've looked into it, part of the problem is we were running the fleet too hard. We'd cut back on funds, they're short on maintenance, they only got one watch at a time. And it seems that nobody in the Navy chain of command or the Pacific Command chain of command.
Nobody what?
Nobody was willing to say, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, we can't do it. We got to slow down. Has it been your experience, I don't mean to focus on this one instance, but did you ever get the impression that the can-do spirit was just too strong, that they take imprudent risks? They wouldn't say to the President or to the Secretary, you know, we just shouldn't do it. It's not a good...
Well, it's not the nature of the Navy or any element of our armed forces to say we can't do it. We had not given, I think, sufficient funds and had asked for too much deployment, too many family separations for too long. But it's fortunate we have here the man that really came up with the answers and solved it. Admiral Greener, would you like to stand and give an answer to that question? But I thought you were on the con then. You were helping me. You always did. Yes.
Let's bring a microphone down. This is Admiral John Greener. John was the CNO.
Former Chief of Naval Operations.
Nobody else has been put on a spot like this.
I've been dying to be heard about this.
Yeah. But he was a darn good one, and we worked together, and we had an understanding how to get things done.
Well, as you said, Senator, it's a little complicated, and I would make two comments. One, we're wired up to do the job as necessary. Number two, I would say that read testimony. If one goes back and reads testimony, as you said, there were a lot of warnings. We are taking risk, and there were a lot of adjectives and adverbs trying to define the risk. It's very difficult to say if we do this 2 more times, we're going to have a collision, we're going to have a failure, or whatever. And number three, it's a complicated process to where the service says we really shouldn't do this. They don't make the decision. They don't say we won't deploy or we don't deploy. That decision is made at a higher level. Of course, they're a major part of it, but I think, in my opinion, the entire process and that balance of overall requirements with resources has to be continually looked at, and they are now. And it's unfortunate this took place, but this has been a long-standing debate about how we manage forces globally and the requirements therein that they support.
And respond on short notice.
Responding on short notice.
Correct.
Yeah.
And also, under your watch was excellent. Family has finally risen up until they're taking more of a voice in things.
Absolutely.
The wives and the children and so forth.
Yeah, you have to, like anything, you have to balance the compensation you're giving them, including the families.
Good. Hey, thanks, Skipper.
Right.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
We'll take one last question.
No, I want a little wrap-up time.
Oh.
Yeah. But take the question.
No. I'm going to give you the wrap-up because I'm near the end. I'm going to let you do wrap-up.
Well, I want to do it. I'm going to do it at my own pace.
You do it at your own pace? How the hell would I argue with that?
Okay, but I was anxious to get more questions myself. Anyway, I want to be serious. This has been a marvelous event in my life. I sort of feel like a son of this outfit. I remember working with Arleigh Burke and that lawyer, Dave Abshire.
Dave Abshire.
And it was a figment in their minds to get this thing started. And John, you have been the one and only person that could bring it together and create this big building. I remember you showed me the plans to this thing. I said, John, that's too damn big. You look at all that white marble and everything in there. But don't worry, we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. You got it done. Nobody thought you could do it. But your persona is what has held this thing together and made it the leading think tank. Now, I'm going to say this. Now, my boys back on the Hill won't like it. But when we started this, I think there were how many? 4 or 5 think tanks around town?
Yeah.
4 or 5. Today, what, 12, 13?
Yeah, there are some big ones.
Right.
Yeah.
This think tank, any of those wonderful staff that helped me with this thing in here, still gone or they all gone?
Well, Karen Wong is
Well,
the
she's
genius that's
wonderful,
behind.
Karen. But anyway, I talked to one of them the other day. You did 10,000 events last year.
Well, no, not 10, but about 2,000.
Was it 2?
2,000.
Well,
yeah.
I was off a few. But maybe collectively. But it just shows how this organization, which is premier amongst the family of wonderful organizations in this town, but you're doing the job that Congress is not doing. You're holding the hearings. You're bringing people up here to freely discuss their views with intelligent staff people and so forth to project that idea out and let it go. And that's extremely important to do. And so I want to thank, also I want to thank the family of the honored man we do.
The Brzezinski family's right down here.
Right down here. I talked to all of them. Would you raise your hands? There you are.
A whole
And
extended
this little
family.
lady right
Yep.
in the front too. There's one.
And
Oh, that's
Emily is right
wonderful. And we had a nice visit, Mom. Yeah. Anyway, this is a celebration not of just John Warner, but it's what this man did and his dream. And I've enjoyed reading a lot of the things that he wrote in preparation to try and do a reasonable job here today. But they're all in so many different parts and different places. I think you've got to get a book written, pulled together, about the subject that he felt strongly about, the manner in which he used to negotiate to get his ends concluded, and put it there and have it so that, you know, dummies like me can go over and look at it and find the
The guide
index
for the rest of us, yeah.
get the answer to the thing. Because if there were ever a time in the history of the country when we need a strong voice out here asserting what you had opened up with, the strength of our Constitution and that type of, it is now. And he believed in it. And he believed in the theory you've got to learn to agree and disagree and all kinds of tricks that he had. It's got to be pulled together, John, in one volume.
That's worthy
It's
cost.
a handbook. And you're not looking for a bisect. Make it paperback so you can get it out there. And take out some of the lofty languages and put it in language that the young people can probably
Accessible
read and understand.
terms, yep.
That's a challenge. Well, listen, folks, I've enjoyed it enormously. Thank you very much.
That's just a,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Like the Russians, always clap for themselves. Thank you, Big John.
Please come up and say you're welcome to John Warner.
Here.
Thank you all.
That's good.